Hello, everybody. My name is Juan. I'm going to do my presentation today on social behaviors, and we're going to specifically look at cooperative breeding, mammals. So go ahead and start. So generally, cooperative breeding entails more than two individuals, basically caring for the young. It's more common in insects and birds, but it does occur in mammals, but only about 1%. Through my research findings, I was able to find that the two key precursors are that females must be monogamous and they must be polytocous. So basically, the monogamy entails that there's much more child rearing going on with both parents, um, and the need for additional help comes from the polytocous element, which basically means that the females are having more than one offspring per litter. So obviously, becomes much harder for parents alone to care for the young in that situation. So go ahead and start with the costs and benefits. So some of the costs include there is obviously less direct fitness for any of the helpers. They basically are not able to reproduce until later on, and they had to spend more time caring for the young, the good social group, uh, and then in some cases there's a higher frequency of infanticide. It looks like what I was able to find was that because there's such a need for additional help within the social group, there occurs this kind of infighting where infants are intentionally murdered. It's sort of in the spiteful biting that can occur when there's extreme need of help. And obviously, since only a few members of the group are reproducing, there is a loss of diverse alleles going on. In extreme cases, such as in naked mole rats, you have one sole dominant female reproducing, and all the other females aren't basically reproducing, so they're not passing their alleles on, and there's a lot of inbreeding that occurs. And then, but some of the benefits are that there is a lower infant mortality rate when obviously when the infighting isn't occurring. Obviously, there's more hands to take care of the offspring. They're usually protected more, and then because of the additional help, the parents are able to hunt and forage. And then obviously, when they take over parenting duties, the other members of the group can go ahead and hunt and forage for themselves. And then another interesting finding was that even in some cases, there's opportunity arises for unrelated helpers to get access to the group, to help out with the child rearing. They gain a lot of parenting skills, and if any of the dominant members of the group perish, they have the opportunity to fill that role and start reproducing themselves. That's pretty interesting. And some of the hypotheses for the evolution for cooperative breeding include basically that cooperative breeding has been restricted to groups where annual mortality is relatively low, so that turnover in breeding positions is slow, and individuals common delay dispersal and age of first reproduction. So we saw this in class when professor talked about the coyotes delaying their dispersal to help out with the child rearing. Basically, with any species that that live long and kind of breed um, in longer periods, they need the additional help whenever they have offspring, and it's um, there's nothing that basically entails the younger members of the group to go out. Obviously, if it's not for sure thing, it's better for them to stay at least for a year or two to gain some parenting skills and overall gain survival skills in general. And then an alternative hypothesis um, is basically that cooperative breeding is restricted to lineages where breeding history allows non-breeding helpers to make substantial contributions to the reproductive output of breeders. So this is more of a honeybee sort of style of cooperative breeding where members of the group have distinct roles. Obviously you have the foragers, the worker bees, you have um, for members that are exclusively just there to rear the children, which obviously is usually the females. And basically this is a much more organized form of cooperative breeding. Um, in some cases, it could actually be more beneficial for members to have these distinct roles. But then you have a third possibility or a third reason that cooperative breeding could have evolved was that a female is a species found in arid environments are usually polytocous, and this may have facilitated the evolution of alloparental care. So again, you have in environments where there's not many resources, you have a tendency for species to evolve polytocous um, forms of reproduction. So if one of the offspring dies, or there's not enough resources for all the offspring, there's a higher chance of the genes passing on if there's more, obviously more offspring per liter per litter. Um, and obviously, like I said before, this is a huge important precursor for it to evolve. So we'll go ahead and actually look at some graphs here at the geographical distribution of styles of social systems. So if you look at the graph on the left, you have cooperative breeding occurring in those blue regions, mainly in Africa and in Australia. And then if you look at some of the graphs on the right side of that of those graphs, you have the variance in annual precipitation occurring. Again, it's mainly you have huge parts of Africa that it's very that again they don't get a lot of rain. It's the same thing with Australia. And interestingly enough, if you look at the other graph on the right, um, you have social monogamous species mainly occurring in Africa and in South America. So, and now obviously the graphs don't perfectly coincide with cooperative breeding. I think in one of the papers that I read, they did find that there's actually other factors that might be more important, and arid environments do play a role, but it was hard for them to ascertain exactly how important it was. The main things are that need to occur: the monogamy and the polytocous elements. Those are more important than the environment. But even still, I would argue that it is much more adaptive for species to be not only polytocous, but cooperative breeding can play a role, especially if the environment is constantly changing or it's low on resources. There's like I said, there's not a certainty for younger members of the group to go out and successfully find other mates or and survive. So it's been much more beneficial for them to stay around, gain those parental skills, gain some survival skills, and that way later on they have a higher chance, being successful. And but generally speaking, it's copper breeding is maladaptive in almost any kind of habitat where there's plentiful resources. Again, there's lower direct fitness for any of the helpers. It's much better for them if they're able to go out early on and reproduce and have much more offspring. It's better if there's as long as there's a good chance of them surviving and successfully mating. There's no reason for them to stay around. But if you want to look at more specifically, you look at meerkats. They have a sort of a same thing with naked morons. They have a alpha female that is the main one that reproduces. You have you, you there are other females of the group and they are able to reproduce, but in many cases, if they do reproduce, if they find those offspring of hers, they tend to get they basically they do infantile where those infants will be killed. Those females will get ostracized and kicked out of the group, and in some cases, even other females are also kicked out. And it's just it's a very tyrannical sort of society that they have created. But as long as you're in the group, you have many benefits of the power in numbers phenomenon. So it's kind of a hard situation for many females to endure. But then if you look at tamarin monkeys, they have those unrelated breeders joining the group, um, and they also have a tendency to when they reproduce and they make twins. It's very common. So for them, and again, those benefits of joining a group and possibly getting the chance to reproduce is there, and then they can also gain those parental skills. And then you have naked mole rats, which are the big extreme in mammals. We'll go ahead and look at the video, the next video that I put on. It very well summarizes how they are. So let's see.
Just beneath the Ethiopian savanna, a mother naked mole rat nurses her latest brood. She's the tyrant of the tunnels, and her definition of motherhood is as creepy as her looks. mole rats are born blind and nearly bald, and that doesn't change much. Adults are just bigger and sport a major set of incisors. Biggest of all is Mum, the Queen. Her squirming subjects are her children and a few remaining siblings. Her babies have to grow up fast. She'll stop nursing them in about a month. A couple of months later, they'll be put to work and most will serve her for the rest of their lives. Some slave in the tunnels, digging for tubers to feed the horde. Others look after Mum's successive broods. Mole rats are the only mammals to have this kind of social structure, more like a colony of termites than a family of rodents. The queen is the only female to breed. If one of her daughters shows signs of fertility, Mum sets her straight in a hurry. For her, motherhood is an assembly line, making near-carbon copies of herself. In other words, she likes to keep the gene pool shallow. When she's in the mood to mate, she seduces her favourite sons. A mole rat colony is so inbred that any two individuals are nearly as alike as identical twins. Lest anyone assume all that inbreeding is unhealthy, they live 8 times longer than similar species of rodents. They're slower to succumb to age-related disorders. They don't even get cancer. Sure, they endure a life of blind servitude to their ringed incestuous terrible mother, but they're very healthy doing it.
All right, so that concludes our video. So as the video showed, naked mole rats are very highly inbred. So if you look at Hamilton's rule, they're basically the coefficient of relatedness is almost 1. It's really, really wild. And like I stated, the females, especially the females, they're just so severely constrained. They almost have no direct fitness. So the benefits would be almost entirely about, just getting their food and protection from the group. And the costs are obviously, they don't reproduce. So it's a really interesting. I really would be hard for me to make an exact equation. But and, if you look at meerkats, they're very similar in that most of the females don't reproduce. However, they do have that potential cost of if they do reproduce, they can obviously be kicked out, and their young can be killed. So it's a really tricky situation for them as well. It's hard for one to rationalize how exactly fair they are, but they do have benefits from staying in the group, and it can definitely be beneficial to them if they go ahead and just help out with the child rearing. So it pretty much concludes my presentation. At the end, I had my resources listed. These two, Lucas, they created basically I saw them repeatedly throughout much of the literature. They did a lot of research on cooperative breeding, so I definitely recommend that you go check them out if you're interested. But otherwise, thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you have a good day. Bye bye.